Close your eyes and listen. You hear the distant hum of New York's foghorns, the rhythmic screech of the subway tunneling beneath Manhattan, and the relentless, frantic pace of millions of feet hitting the pavement in Times Square. This is New York, the unofficial capital of the world. But what if we could turn back the clock? What if we could peel back the layers of asphalt, scrape away the concrete, and erase the skyscrapers until only the raw, jagged edges of the island remain? Let me take you back over 360 years to the year 1660. The sounds of the city then weren't engines and sirens, but the rhythmic thud of a shipbuilder's mallet, the rustle of ancient oak forests, and the salty splash of the Atlantic against a pristine shoreline. A place the Lenape people knew as Manhattan. At the very southern tip of that island, a strange, tiny town is rising, defined by steep Dutch gables and windmills turning lazily in the sea breeze. Welcome to New Amsterdam. This wasn't just a settlement. It was a megacity in embryo, the place where the DNA of ambition, diversity, and cold, hard pragmatism first combined to create the American spirit. In this video, powered by AI reconstruction based on the famous 1660 Castello Plan, we dive into the muddy streets of New Amsterdam at its peak to understand why this tiny outpost became the blueprint for every global metropolis today. We begin our journey at the southern tip, where Fort Amsterdam stands as a silent sentinel over the Hudson River. Imagine yourself standing on these earth and stone ramparts. This wasn't a majestic European castle built for glory. It was a gritty, multi-purpose complex, part military barracks, part fur warehouse, part administrative nerve center. Here, Director General Peter Stuyvesant, the man with the silver-banded wooden leg, gazes out over the harbor. He wasn't a polished politician. He was an executive of the Dutch West India Company, and New Amsterdam at this moment was essentially a corporate star. Inside the fort, you'd witness controlled chaos. Clerks frantically inventory beaver pelts, the brown gold of the 17th century, destined for European markets. Arguments erupt in a dozen languages: French from Huguenot refugees, German, English, and of course, the guttural, businesslike Dutch of the ruling class. Just outside the fort's gates lies a broad common area, an open space used for markets and gatherings. This area would later become Bowling Green. Today, it sits near the Charging Bull of Wall Street, but in 1660, it was simply the town's outdoor living room, where cattle were traded, news was shared, and residents found a moment to breathe. Leaving the stern atmosphere of the fort, we walk along Pearl Street, the artery hugging the East River shoreline. Why Pearl? Because the coast was once littered with oyster shells that shimmered like pearls in the sun. This was the district of the elite, the merchant princes of the New World. Their houses were narrow and tall, with red and yellow brick facades and stepped gables reaching skyward. Many of those bricks were imported from Europe, sometimes used as ballast in ships. For wealthy merchants like Cornelis Steenwyck, a house wasn't just shelter, it was a statement. Step inside, and the luxury is striking. Persian rugs, Chinese porcelain, and heavy oak cabinets filled with meticulous ledgers. In New Amsterdam, status wasn't defined by noble titles, but by global connections. The only question that mattered was, where do you stand in the world of trade? But New Amsterdam wasn't only for the wealthy. Turn onto Stone Street, the first paved street in the city. Residents demanded it and helped pay for it because the mud and dust were swallowing the town. Here, we find the true soul of the city, taverns. By the mid-17th century, they were everywhere. Not just places to drink, but community centers, trading hubs, and newsrooms, all in one.
Welcome, friend. Pull up a seat by the fire.
I tell you, that's not the truth of it.
You're wrong. I saw it with my own eyes.
Imagine stepping into one at sunset. The air is thick with smoke and roasted meat. A sailor from the Caribbean tells stories of sugar ships. A German craftsman argues over timber prices with a farmer from Long Island. This was a social experiment unlike anything seen before. Practical tolerance. When Jewish refugees arrived in 1654, fleeing persecution in Brazil, Stuyvesant tried to expel them. But the Dutch West India Company overruled him not out of idealism, but practicality. If you contributed to the economy, you could stay. That decision set the pattern. New Amsterdam became a place where private beliefs mattered less than economic value, the origin of New York's multicultural identity. Look up at the windmills on higher ground. They weren't just symbols, they powered the town, grinding grain and supporting industry. The sounds of saws, hammers, and wind created a proto-industrial symphony. This was a city of builders, of hustlers. Even the word hustle traces back to Dutch roots. Instead of cathedrals, they built infrastructure wharves, canals, and dikes. One canal ran through the town center, allowing boats to reach warehouses directly. Today, that canal is gone, replaced by Broad Street. But this prosperity had a darker side. At the bottom of society were enslaved people, many brought from Africa. Under Dutch rule, some held a status called half-freedom, allowed to own land and marry, but still bound to forced labor. Meanwhile, tensions with the Lenape people escalated as settlers expanded into their lands. This brings us to the northern edge of town, the Wall, a wooden defensive barrier stretching across the island. It wasn't a massive stone fortress, but a practical line of defense, the boundary between the colony and the wilderness. Ironically, it never stopped an invasion. In 1664, the English arrived by sea. Warships entered the harbor, cannons aimed at the fragile town. Stuyvesant wanted to fight, but the merchants calculated the cost. War meant ruin. So they surrendered. The wall was eventually torn down, and the road beside it became Wall Street, the financial center of the world. Though New Amsterdam lasted only 40 years, its legacy is permanent. When the English renamed it New York, they couldn't erase its DNA, trade, diversity, and pragmatism. That's why New York has always been different. Louder, faster, more open. It wasn't built on kings or conquest. It was built on deals. And even today, when you stand at Battery Park and look out over the harbor, you're not just seeing history. You're seeing the beginning of the modern world.